Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ginger the Plane. In this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. I've had a lot of people ask if I would show what's behind the wizard's curtain, so to speak. And meaning, how do I actually film my flights? And what kind of equipment do I use? How do I connect it all? How do I capture the video and the audio? And then what do I do with it when I have it? Do I edit that in a certain kind of software or some software on my phone? How do you do that and then get it out to YouTube where people can watch it? So, in a week or two ago, I actually gave this exact presentation to my local EAA chapter. And I presented the material on a Saturday morning, and the folks that were there seemed to really enjoy it. And I had quite a few people say to me, I really wish you would put a video out with all of that information that you just shared. And I thought, okay, I'm getting questions through the channel. I'm getting comments like that at the EAA chapter. So here we are. This is the video where I go through how to film your flights. So we're going to start a little bit with my aviation videography journey. How did I get to this point where I'm actually filming flights and sharing that on the internet? We'll talk a little bit about filming from airplanes, a little bit about in-flight camera management. We'll talk about common camera settings and editing software options, and then we'll kind of bring things together at the end with post-production magic. What I do in the editing bay and how I make it ready for you to watch. And then finally, just a little bit about YouTube and some final thoughts. Q&A, definitely, I'd love to hear from you. So in addition to subscribing, please feel free to like this video. And if you have questions, please leave those in the comments. I see all of your questions and comments, and I usually respond within a few hours. So definitely reach out to me if you have any questions after this video. So how did I start filming my flights? Well, I think like everyone, I started to take photographs with my phone. And yeah, you could get some good photos and you could share those with your friends and your family members. And with newer phones having such great cameras that can also do video, I started to film flights with my iPhone. And, I'd send those to my brother. I would, share those with my wife. Once I got onto Instagram and Facebook, I started putting a few clips and things there. And it was actually a conversation I had where, my brother and I were talking on the phone one day. And he said, hey, I like your videos, but maybe you should try using a GoPro. And so I did. I bought a GoPro. And I started to use that, and I had some good luck with it. And I don't want to really talk down on GoPros here, but I had some issues with the battery. I lost a few videos because of file corruption. And they're just really super expensive. And I just thought, okay, I am going to need to find a camera that fits my needs a little bit better. Maybe, a cockpit environment, an aviation environment requires something a little bit different. And I want to get a few cameras for a few different shots. So I looked around. And the camera that I found that really gives me the best bang for my buck is the DJI Osmo Action. This camera is the equal of GoPro in many ways. It has image stabilization. It's got really good color saturation. It has excellent onboard audio, and it attaches to all of the mounts that you'll have for your GoPros. Taking a look on the right at this image here, this is a box that I built to carry all of my camera gear when I am heading to the airport and deciding, hey, on this particular day, I think I'll capture this flight. And I've got 6 cameras in there. I have all my mounting hardware. I have an audio jack. I have a voice recorder and some spare batteries, and just really everything I would need to capture that flight from start to finish. And the DJIs are really kind of the heart of that system. And if you haven't looked at those, I highly recommend that you do that. Compare them to the GoPros and other cameras that are out there and see if they suit your needs. They suit mine fine, but we're all a little different, and you might find that for your use, you want something else. So, speaking of something else, I've also recently purchased a Canon XA60. This is a 4K handheld camera. It's probably a little bit overkill in the cockpit, so I don't use it there. I use it on the ground for B-roll, for extra shots. I like to use it as well for interviews if I'm interviewing someone and I want to get a nice frame on that scene. This is really nice to put on the top of a tripod with some lighting. It does a great job. And I've also bought recently the DJI wireless mics, and those are great as well because they just clip on and they're super easy to sync up. And because it's DJI, I know they're going to work with my DJI Osmo Action cameras. So lots of family, cooperation here within that brand. And then, of course, there's lots of other accessories, grips, mounts, power banks, lots of stuff. So what I want to do is I want to kind of take you down the path and show you a little bit about why I moved from an iPhone to an action camera, moved from the GoPro to the DJI, and kind of where I'm at now. So this is one of my earliest videos that I have on the channel. In fact, I don't think I had been filming my flights for more than a week or two when I shot this. And you can see it's kind of jumping around a little bit. I've got a lot of prop blur in there, and notice how the image gets really blurry. Well, the phone is actually focusing on my windscreen, not outside the window. And oh, there it goes. It looks outside just as I'm turning the camera. And of course, there's Ginger's old instrument panel before the big upgrade. So, it did the job. It was great. It's super easy to use, and I can turn it on, turn it off without it distracting me while I'm flying. But clearly not really giving me the quality that I was looking for. So, better phone, iPhone 12. This was shot by my wife. We were coming back from a nice sunset flight one night, and you can see that the processor in the camera on the iPhone 12 is much, much better. It's really kind of handling that propeller blur much better than the iPhone 7 did. In fact, I would really give this a thumbs up as far as the quality of how it captured that image. You're also getting some image stabilization, so the image isn't jumping around. You have a pretty clearly defined horizon. It was an incredibly smooth night that night, so that helped a lot. But, this really does show how far phones have come. And you could, if you wanted to, film entirely on a newer iPhone or Android, and you would have great success doing that. For me, I did really want to take it up to that next level. So we looked at the GoPro. Now, in this image here, you're going to notice the GoPro is mounted on the tail, and I'll talk about mounts in a few minutes, but it really gives you that action perspective, and not a bad landing either. One of the few that I tend to get, but hey, when you get one, show it, right? This is another video that's on the channel, and it's actually my highest viewed short video. And honestly, I think a big part of that was because of this GoPro mount on the tail. Does a great job. So let's take a look now at the DJI. Now, in this clip here, we're showing multiple camera angles. I've got one DJI on the ceiling shooting forward. I have another DJI there on the panel on the glare shield. That's this image here. And it's the hardest thing in the world to shoot into bright sunshine. And this is with an ND4 filter on the camera. So, the prop's going at a slow speed. I've got a bug on the windshield on the right. I've got sun glare on the left. Really the hardest thing to shoot. But now, if you're at the tail and you're shaded, look how much better that image is. And not my greatest landing there, but I'll take it. And then, of course, this view here from the side, coming up here in a moment, this view shows you color saturation. It shows you image stabilization. And it just, I think, gives a much better sense of why I eventually switched away from the GoPros to the DJIs. So let's start talking a little bit about how to actually film from an airplane. And before I do that, I just really want to say safety is absolutely the most important thing. You want to focus on your flying because you never know when something is going to pop up in front of you. You guys have maybe seen an earlier video that I showed where I had dogs on the runway in Oak Harbor. That was kind of nuts. I was happening to film that flight, and there are these two dogs running across the runway. If I hadn't been looking outside, I wouldn't have seen them. I wouldn't have been able to go over and land long, and I would not have wanted to hit a dog. Let's put it that way. And then also, in a recent video, we encountered a few birds up in the air, and I think it's important that, again, you're looking outside the cockpit. You let the cameras do their thing. You just set them up and let them rip. And then you can just focus on your flying. So let's talk a little bit about camera placement and locations. And I'm speaking here specifically about what I do on Ginger. Now, you're free to put cameras wherever you like. Keep in mind that you want to have a good, secure mounting location. You want it to be in a place that will not interfere with control surfaces in any way, where you're also not going to drop a camera and potentially harm someone or property on the ground. You want to keep in mind that, outside cameras you really have to handle very, very specially. Inside cameras inside the cockpit, again, you want to put them in locations where they're not obstructing your view or inhibiting your flying in any way. So looking outside for the moment, I like the tail tie-down hook. That is honestly my favorite camera location. And I have a clamp style mount that you can get from My Pilot Pro. And all of the mounts and their locations where you can get them will be listed in the video notes down below. I'm not an affiliate or anything. I don't do that. But just for your convenience, I'll list them there so that you can go have a look at them and make your own decisions on whether you like that mount or not. But for me, I like the tail tie-down hook. And it gives a great three-wheel view of your landings. You can see both main gear and your nose gear. And the other thing I like about it is I can see my flap positions. I can see which wheel touches down first. Am I lined up on the center line? Am I drifting left, drifting right? Just lots of good opportunities to really learn and improve your landings with this particular camera position. It's also a great spot to look downward. Sometimes when I'm flying out over the ocean, I'll see something cool down on the water, maybe a cargo ship, or maybe the way that the waves are moving around an island a certain way. And this is a super good camera for shooting downward as well. So that location is really one of my favorites. Another outside location that I really like is on the inspection cover on the left wing. Now, I really want to make sure that you know that this camera location, as well as the tail location, they have to be temporary locations that cannot be permanently affixed. They have to be easily removed, which both of those locations are. On an inspection panel, you have sheet metal screws. So you have to replace the nutser inside the wing that holds the inspection plate in with a sheet metal screw, or sorry, with a regular screw nutser. And these are two stainless steel screws that hold this small little mounting pad onto the inspection plate. It's easily removed. I can have that off within about 2 minutes, put both of the screws back, and it's essentially just an inspection panel at that point. There is a smaller bracket that does screw onto this flat plate, and that's what actually holds your camera. And again, everything comes off really quickly. So if I fly somewhere and I'm going to be away from the airplane for a few hours, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to be leaving a $300 camera on my tail tie down and out on my wing. So I'll usually just unscrew those and then put them inside the airplane. And then I can go and walk into town, have some breakfast, or walk around an air show and enjoy seeing everybody's cool stuff. So just, a little bit of a word there about that location. One cool thing about this spot is I have noticed in a recent M0A video that Jason's also using a similar mount and location. In fact, same views of his aircraft there using this location. So I like it a lot. I think it gives a great view of the airplane. It shows where you're going. Again, it can show your landings. Are you putting main gear down first and then the nose? How quickly, are you touching down? Just lots of little tidbits of information that you can glean from this location. Another great location inside the airplane now is on the side windows. And there's this fantastic suction cup mount that you can buy. I believe, again, this is either My Pilot Pro or I might have gotten this through Sporty's. Can't remember exactly, but I'm sure you can find them in both locations. And this uses a standard GoPro style mount, and I have a DJI camera mounted on that location. You can get one for each side if you want, and once you turn these on, you just let them rip. You don't have to touch them again. They're great locations for capturing audio, though sometimes I've noticed that with this arm setup, you get a little bit of a vibration, and it's not something that you'll see in the image, but it is something you can hear in the audio. So I don't tend to use the in-cockpit audio from this location, but I do really love these side camera mounts. Another location that is really fun and I like having, as long as they're mounted low and out of my eyesight, is the glare shield mounts. Now I have two. I have one on the right side and one on the left. The mount on the right side is for looking forward. The mount on the left side is for looking back into the cockpit. And you can see in the second photo down what that looks like when both cameras are mounted. And then from the outside in the third photo at the bottom, where that forward view is also connected to an audio wire, which I'll talk about in a later scene. And then finally, the last location that I really, really like, and again, I like all these different views and I try to stitch them together in interesting ways and capture something that was happening out in the direction of that camera at that specific moment. Having 6 cameras running really gives you lots of options. And this particular camera on the top roof is really wonderful because it shows you my panel, shows you outside the airplane in the front when I'm making an approach. I like it during taxi when I'm having a conversation with a passenger, and it's just an all-around great location. The one downside, though, is when you're getting in the aircraft, if you have this camera already mounted, you will hit your head on it. I have done it. I have done it probably 50 times. And I've learned the hard way to leave it on the seat, get in the airplane, get yourself belted in, get the seat in the location you want, and then put this on the ceiling. And speaking of getting in and kind of hooking up your cameras, one thing you never hear about in anyone else's video, and I almost forgot to mention it as well, is turn on your outside cameras before you get in the airplane and get situated, because they're out there on the wing or out on the tail, and it's not like being in a car where you can pull over and, oh, hey, sorry, ATC, I know I'm out on the taxiway, but I forgot to turn on my tail camera, so I'm going to pull over here and go do that. No, you don't do that. Once that engine starts, you're committed to flying. If you didn't turn the camera on, you're just not going to have that view on that flight. Or you turn around and you head back to the ramp, shut down, and then get out, and then take care of your cameras. Don't do it out on the taxiways. Don't try to do it in flight using remote equipment. I'll talk about that later. It just really doesn't work, and it's distracting, frankly. Turn those on and then get in the airplane. And then once you're in the airplane, before you start the engine, turn on all your other cameras. And I'll talk about syncing the cameras so that they're all on the same timestamp. But it's something you want to do before you even start the engine. And I know I can hear you guys rolling your eyes out there saying, duh, but you'd be surprised. I've had a lot of conversations with people over the last couple of years, and they always ask, how do you turn on and off your cameras that are outside? You can't. I'm sure there's a way that you can do it, and actually I will mention a couple of ways that I've heard about. But for me, it's a best practice. Again, safety of flight. I don't want to be distracted. I want to focus on the flying. The cameras are there kind of as a incidental thing. I film maybe 1 out of 7 or 8 flights. I don't film them all. And if I bring cameras around or along on a flight, it's because I know I might be going somewhere that I want to capture. Or maybe it's a really beautiful day and I know the water's going to be really pretty, and I just want to see that for myself and, capture that flight. And if it turns out that it's an interesting flight, something that you guys might want to watch, then I'll edit the video down and I'll share it with you. And so, again, I film maybe 1 out of 7 or 8 flights, and maybe out of 3 or 4 videos that I film, I'll actually make a video to share on the channel. So, that's just me. Other people might be doing it more, aggressively than that, but that's just how I do it. So these are the mounts that I use most often. And again, they're temporarily mounted. They're not permanently attached. Everything can come off in a very quick matter of minutes to a second or two. Like the mount that I have inside the airplanes, inside the airplane, I can take all those cameras off literally in a minute. And so after I've landed and shut down, before I'm even exiting the airplane, I'm taking all the cameras off and putting them away. That way they're secured, and I don't have to worry about them when I'm trying to grab some breakfast. But there are 3 different styles that I like to use. The first one is the clamp style, which we talked about on the tail tie down. You can use that out on the wings as well, on the strut tie downs. It works great in that location too. I just find it very limiting. You can't really turn the camera back at the airplane. You can point it forward, which is really a great way to do it. Or you can point it backward, which is kind of cool. No one's saying that you can't do lots of different positions with your camera mounts. But just for me, I like it on the tail. And this particular clamp style mount is extremely secure. It does not move around. And you'll notice how I have the camera kind of turned upward at 90 degrees so that it hangs down relatively close to the fuselage. When I rotate Ginger on landings, I don't want to have anything too low in the tail where I might actually strike the ground with the camera. You don't want to be that guy that leaves a bunch of camera parts out on a runway, right? The other thing you'll notice there is the blue handle is tilted downward slightly. I don't want anything near my rudder, ever. I don't want that handle to ever interfere with a control surface. And I purposely angle it downward like that to give me even more room than I already have, as far as my interaction with that control surface. So it's just something I do. It's a safe practice, and I think a good practice. The slim mount is what I mentioned earlier for the inspection panel out on the wing. Again, this one here is great for capturing that 3/4 forward view of the cockpit and the cowling. Also catches your gear. It looks somewhat ahead. If you use a fisheye type lens, you can get almost a 270-degree view. You can see all the way to the tail and then all the way to where you're actually heading. And I've seen that done in a few other folks' videos as well, and that looks pretty good. But for me, I don't use a fisheye lens. I like it just pointing forward, like you see in the image. And then finally, you have the suction cup or the adhesive pads. Those are great for use inside of the airplane. And I'm going to make that point, inside the airplane, because I have seen videos where, boy, that sure looks like that was attached to the side of the fuselage. I wonder how they got their shot. And I've reached out to people and I've been told, oh yeah, I used the suction cup outside the airplane. Don't do that. Suction cups fail. I've had them come off and land on my seat. Suction cups are not secure. I know that they can squeeze tight, but you got a lot of vibration, and especially outside in the slipstream, no, don't do that. That camera is going to come off. First, it's going to cost you a lot of money because you're going to lose your camera. But more importantly, that thing could go down and it could land on someone or someone's home or car, or you just don't want to do that. Suction cups inside only. And the adhesive pads, again, I've seen that out on people's wings. And, if you look at the sticky pad that's on the bottom of this, that thing holds forever. It is amazingly strong, but I wouldn't want that outside. That mount itself is made of plastic, and aside from the adhesive holding it onto whatever it's stuck onto, that plastic mount isn't meant to handle G's and side loads and slipstreams. It's just meant to do what I'm showing here, which is hang down from a surface or sit on a glare shield and just have a very low stress mount for a camera. So don't put suction cups and adhesive pads outside. I don't recommend it. And I think if you're doing it and it's working for you, you're going to lose a camera eventually. It's going to land on a runway, and you're going to have a whole lot of splaining to do. But that's just you. That's not me. And this is just showing you what I do and why I do it that way. Here are a few other location possibilities. There's that beautiful yellow Piper Cub called Bananas, and he created a pole-mounted mount for the back of his tail wheel. And I don't know anything about this. I don't even know where you get it. I think he might have made it himself. I have no clue. But it does produce some pretty amazing shots. Honestly, though, I'm never doing this on Ginger. I like my tail tie-down hook. It's nice and secure. I would worry about this location, but, it seems to work perfectly fine. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. It's a tail wheel, and you're dragging that across the ground, bumping around. If it hasn't come off yet, then I probably never will, but not something that I'm going to do. Another thing that you see here, kind of in the middle, where the young lady has the 360-degree camera out on a pole, that is a really cool location. I really like the 360 cameras. I like the way that they capture those kinds of views. Just really, really neat. And the way that pole is positioned, it looks back on itself and it literally disappears. So it's just a real neat way of capturing some video. One thing I do notice though is the case, and I'm sure this was just a mock-up, not what was actually used to fly, but that case in the image there coming off the strut, it's plastic. And also the case in the lower right, that's plastic. You should really use aluminum cases outside of the airplane. They're much stronger. They won't crack on you. They take loads, no problem. And plastic does degrade over time. It gets brittle. You may not even know that you have a tiny little stress crack in it until your camera leaves your airplane someday. So always, always, always use aluminum cases outside your airplane. And the aluminum cases that I use, I buy from a company called FlightFlix. I think there are other companies out there. You could probably Google that and find them. In fact, I know I've seen a few on eBay and I think a few on Amazon. But for my 2 outside cameras, I really like the aluminum cases that I got from FlightFlix. So, in-flight camera management. We've talked a lot about set and forget and keep your eyes looking outside the cockpit. And I really don't think I can overstress that. Turn your cameras on. Trust that you've got them set up right. Make sure that you've done everything you can on the ground before the engine's running to get everything lined up the way you like it. And then just go fly your flight. Have a nice flight. Have a good time. Get to your destination, land, and then disconnect all your cameras. And later on, when you're back at your house and you can hook them all up to your computer, you can see what kind of footage you got. And again, don't stress this. You're not shooting every single flight for a video on YouTube. I hope you're not. You do it for yourself. You do it for your own fun. You do it for your enjoyment. And if you do happen to have a video that's kind of cool and looks really neat, and geez, I should share that, then go ahead and share that. But be prepared that more often than not, you're going to have crummy footage. You might get a bug right on the middle of the lens. I've had that on this camera off to the right here, that tail camera looking forward. I flew into Point Roberts, a little grass strip, and I picked up a little bit of something off the grass, and it went right on the camera lens. Blurry. The whole flight back, I got no footage. So, if you're filming and you get really good footage and it's cool and interesting, that's a bonus. Just have a good flight. Because I guarantee you that if you're not paying attention, you might end up in a situation where you're flying formation with someone. Sometimes intentionally, like in the case of my RV7 formation video. That was still so cool. I really wish I had had an opportunity to thank this gentleman and his beautiful RV8 even more. Or sorry, RV7 even more. It was just such a beautiful moment, and I really do appreciate that. And then, of course, people fly through TFRs. Sometimes they don't realize they're doing it. If you're distracted by filming and doing other things in the cockpit, you very well could end up with an F-16 on your wing someday. So let's not do that. So taking a look at how do you control your camera while you're flying? Well, again, you want to manage your cameras before you fly. I've got my tail tie down clamp there and my inspection panel slim mount. And those you can turn on, and you can basically say they're going to run for an hour. I'm not going to be able to affect them or touch them in any way. They're going to get what they're going to get. And after an hour, the battery will die off and the camera will turn off. There is an app that you can get, and it's usually by the manufacturer. So GoPro's got one. DJI has one. I don't know of any third-party apps, but they say that you can wirelessly connect with your camera and control the shot. I have tried this on the ground in my hangar with the tail camera, And even in the hangar, without moving, it was flaky. At best, I got a connection 1 out of 10 times. So, am I going to bother with this while I'm flying? No, not at all. Honestly, it's just not worth the trouble anyway because I have 2 cameras. You can only control 1 camera with this app. And which one do I pick? Which one do I decide I'm going to save and turn back on? And can I even turn it back on once I turned it off? Now I've lost all that footage, right? And I'm being distracted and I'm doing something other than flying. So I don't use the app. You can use it if you want, but I just choose not to. And then finally, your iPhone or your Android. You have a phone. It's a great way to have a flexible use type camera or device in the cockpit. And you can take photos, you can capture moments, you can take little video snippets for social media, for Instagram and Facebook and other places, and then put it down. You're obviously not going to be holding a camera during a critical phase of flight. If you're lucky enough to have someone with you and, they wouldn't mind holding the camera, they could always film for you. And I've had that happen many times. My wife and friends will have a camera or a phone, and they'll film during a landing or other phase of flight when I'm busy, frankly. And I like that. It's pretty convenient. Moving on, again, you want to try to capture your in-flight audio. Nothing is cooler to me than watching a video and hearing what's happening, right? You want to hear those ATC calls. You want to hear the conversations between the people in the airplane, and you want to be able to interact or hear how that flight kind of evolves and what people are looking at and what they're thinking at the time. So capturing in-flight audio is a really, really important part, I think, of any decent YouTube video. And for my use, I like to use the audio adapter and a cord up on the glare shield going to the DJI that looks forward. I've always used that camera for audio. It gives a nice place for that cord and for that adapter where the adapter is not going to be pulled out accidentally. It's not going to vibrate out. I like the cord coming down on the passenger side into the map pocket, and then the headset connector actually plugs into one of the connectors on that audio adapter and then into the panel. Done. You don't even have to interact with it. You just connect it and off you go. And a couple of words of wisdom here, learning from my mistakes. After you've done your video and audio syncing, you want to make sure that you connect the adapter to the camera. I have flown plenty of times where I've forgotten to connect this adapter, and you hear nothing. All you hear is engine. All you hear is the normal sounds of a flight. There's no ATC audio. There's no in-cockpit conversations. It's a total miss. And unfortunately, I've done that more than once and learned the hard lessons of making sure to do it on the ground before I turn anything on. So in that bottom left photo, you can see I have the audio adapter connected, and it's doing its job capturing the audio from that flight. And then for cockpit audio, I really like using, again, the upper mount camera, the one that I have hanging off the ceiling. It just does a really wonderful job of capturing the whole sound inside the cockpit. You get a little bit of audio bleed in from speaking when you're on the ground, but if you sync up your cameras and sync up your audio just right, all of that kind of disappears into the background. And this camera is really wonderful for catching the tire chirp when you're landing, the sound of the engine running up when you're taking off. It's just a great location. It doesn't vibrate in that spot for some reason, and I just really love having the camera and the audio from that location. And now here's a couple of things I just want to share. This really is, what audio can do for you when it all comes together. And I'm going to have to bring the sound up for you here a little bit. I love this sound on landing. When you hear that wind noise over the control surfaces, you hear the stall horn read, and you're hearing that first chirp of the tires when they kiss the ground. And then if you've done a really decent landing, you hear that little thunk at the end when the nose gear comes down. And how cool is it to have the ATC and cockpit audio? I absolutely love that. And, if you guys haven't figured it out by now, I'll just say it. I make these videos really more for me than for anybody. And I'm just capturing my flights and trying to capture memories. And when I can share them and you guys like them, that's kind of a bonus. And this particular night was a really beautiful night, really nice flight. And when I went through the audio and the video later, and I saw that landing from the tail tie down, and I saw my tires touch, and just the way the audio and the video were working together with the light, I'll tell you, just really made me very, very pleased and happy that I was able to get that. So, camera settings. Don't go anywhere yet. I know you guys are thinking, oh, okay, this is where I'm going to tune out. There are actually a few important things about setting up a camera that you really should know if you're going to film using an action camera or any kind of a camera in an airplane. First of all, MP4 format. I can't stress that enough. Everybody that likes to shoot on different formats will have their own reasons for doing it, but MP4 is really sort of the gold standard. That's the format that you use when you upload a video to YouTube. It's also the format that you use in a lot of different editors. And the editors can take different formats, of course, but MP4 is just the easiest one to work with. You can shoot in 4K, but sometimes 4K is really not all it's cracked up to be, so we'll talk about that. Frame rates are also something that I'm going to show you some different frame rates and why I would shoot with one versus another. I've talked about ND filters a little bit already in the video, but I'll talk about them a little bit more, and we'll talk about battery life as well. So, file formats. In the old days, we used to have AVI. I know MKZ is out there as well. There's movie files, lots of different files. MP4 is your friend. If you use MP4, you're going to be very happy. It'll be the easiest thing to upload to YouTube or any other file sharing format that you use online. And it's just a great all-around do-everything format. So if you have the option to choose on your phone or in your camera which format that you want to use, I would always suggest you use MP4. As far as image resolution goes, 4K is beautiful. I mean, look at this photo of this parakeet. And, on the right you have 4K, on the left you have 1080p. And this is a super, super, super sharp close-up. And you would expect that 4K would outshine regular 1080p. But when you're flying and you're looking at big views, big vistas, grand scenery on a large scale, you really don't need 4K. 4K is awesome for up close and tight shots. But for the big views, I find 1080p is actually preferable. In fact, what you probably don't even realize is on YouTube, all videos, unless you specifically upload it as 4K, all videos will default to 1080p. And they will go to that full HD resolution. Again, 4K is awesome. If you're sitting at a desk and you're having a conversation and doing that type of video, great. it's probably going to look wonderful in 4K. That's when I would use it too. But for flying, 1080p is, I think, the best resolution. It gives you really good images. It also gives you smaller file sizes. It's a lot easier to edit, and because the files are smaller, it's a lot easier to upload when you do eventually go to upload it to wherever you're going to put it. So for me, I like full HD 1080p. And there's no one saying that you can't shoot in 4K and then downgrade your resolution to 1080p. You could certainly do that, but it just absolutely crushes your SD cards, your memory cards and your cameras, and I'm sure it consumes the batteries at a little bit faster clip, but I might be wrong on that. But for me, I like full HD 1080p. So frame rates. Frame rates are something that is a bit of an art form, and I've heard people who really know their stuff about filming different videos talk about frame rate, and they have their opinions on it. What I've always been told is that 24 frames per second is cinematic, and that gives you that big movie kind of feel. 30 frames per second is what I usually use. I use that when I'm flying. I set the camera at 30, and it gives me really good resolution and really good pacing on the video itself. And it makes a great image if you're using it for time lapse. And then there's 60 frames per second, which is awesome. We'll talk about that in a second, but I want to give you an example of 30 frames per second. This particular video, I was filming a DART mission, a disaster airlift response team mission. And we were at Bellingham International Airport. We had a lot of different airplanes arriving. I just wanted to try to capture that. So I used the time lapse looking down onto the apron, and it came out great. And that was 30 frames per second. But for getting good slow motion, you really want to try to use 60 frames per second. And I had forgotten, I was experimenting a little bit with high-speed film on the tail camera, and I had left that set at 60 frames per second. And I also had a couple of other cameras in the airplane. I think the forward-looking camera on the glare shield was also at 60. And I was glad that actually I had made that mistake, because that last video where I'm flying and we spotted some birds up ahead, and then had very minimal amount of time to react. Right about here is where you can see that's 60 frames per second. See the flapping of the wings and all the detail that you can see in that bird? That you would not have caught with 30 frames per second, and you wouldn't have caught it at all with 24 frames per second. It had been very blurry. So the ability to slow the video down and actually capture an image with 60 frames per second, it's just actually pretty amazing. So am I going to fly with 60 frames per second all the time now? Absolutely not. I'm going to fly with 30. And I also don't want to see birds that close ever again. I didn't really like having the bird go by me that closely. And we were looking. I was looking outside the cockpit. I saw him well in advance, and we took evasive action. But yeah, I would rather not have any kind of video like that again, frankly. And but it was good that I was shooting at 60 frames per second so I could capture it. So ND filters. What are ND filters? Well, ND filters are like a tinted lens that can screw onto the front of your camera lens. And an ND filter has varying degrees of tint. They're very light, or they can be very dark. And the darker the tint, the more that it slows down your processor speed in your camera for the camera lens. The way that it was explained to me was Imagine, you're wearing no sunglasses and it's a really super bright day. If you look at your pupils are going to be super small, right? Otherwise, your eyes are going to hurt, and you're trying to keep as much of that light out of your eye as you can. If you put on sunglasses, they'll tint and filter some of that light, and your pupil will dilate a little bit, but it's still pretty bright. If you put on a ball cap above that, now you've really knocked down the amount of light getting around the sunglasses, and your pupil will dilate just that much more. It's kind of like that with the camera. The camera is very susceptible to direct sunlight right in front of you. It affects your propler. It affects the image quality. It'll wash out the image. And the processor doesn't really like that kind of light. Whereas if you put some filters in front of the lens and you shade the lens a little bit, it'll make everything happier. But you can overdo it as well. So I'm going to again show you this video. This is without an ND filter. You can see the prop blur. And yeah, this was an iPhone 7, so image quality wasn't so great, but it kind of gives you the sense of what I'm talking about. Now, if you take a look at this image here, you'll see an overcorrection. I actually used an ND8 filter on the video at this particular day, and it was really slowing down the processor to the point where you could see that prop almost stopping. And then it actually does stop here. But, there is also overcorrecting. So you have to kind of find that sweet spot. And for my normal flying, I like ND4 filters. ND4 does a really good job of eliminating prop blur. And even when you're flying with the sun just glaring on you, killing you, with brightness, it does a really good job of managing that. In this particular video, I have the sun behind me, and this is one of the hardest ways of capturing images. See the light reflection in the lower part of the propeller just above the cowl? That's the glare of the sun right behind me. And you can see it's even a little bit more pronounced in this particular shot. Really difficult to get rid of, but it's so much better because of that ND4 filter. And here, when we kind of freeze the frame for a moment, you can see there's very little prop blur, if any at all, in this image. And boy, Baker Lake and Mount Baker just looked spectacular that day, and I wouldn't have wanted it to be ruined by prop blur. So battery life extenders. We've talked a little bit about action cameras and their batteries usually lasting about an hour with continuous use. And that is the way I use them. I set them and forget them. I turn the cameras on outside, and I'm done. I get in the airplane, sync them all up, and then take off. And I just go fly where I'm going to fly. If the cameras die, then they die. And when I get to the next destination, before I fly again, I'll take a few spare batteries and exchange them, and then I'll have fresh batteries for the next flight home. But there are some other things you could do. If you're inside the cockpit, I have heard of people using what's called a brick or a portable battery with a charger cable to connect to the cameras. And that just lets them run indefinitely. I mean, they'll run for hours with one of these connected. I don't know how you do this outside on the wing or in the tail. I wouldn't even recommend trying. I don't think that these are suitable for that. If you're looking to do that, you might want to consider the second option here in the middle. But again, these are plastic. These are plastic cases. And even though they have battery extenders on them, for me personally, I wouldn't use these outside on the wing. These are great for in the cockpit, maybe on a selfie stick when you're walking around town. But I wouldn't use these in any way outside the cockpit. And then on the far right, there's ship's power. This is something I actually saw a while back on one of Aviation 101's videos. Josh was showing an upgrade that he had made to his panel. And one of the things they had done when they were doing the upgrade was putting USB power ports out on the inspection panel. And that is brilliant. That seems like that would solve the outside camera power connection quite handily. I've not found anyone that does a kit for this. I don't know if there is one available. I'm still looking, but that seems pretty clever. And I guess as long as it can be disconnected and it's obviously installed by a A&P mechanic and signed off in your logs, using all the appropriate, right sign-offs, then it should be fine. But it's not something I use. And honestly, most of my videos are 10-15 minutes long. I shoot an hour's worth of footage. If I can't find something interesting and good in an hour's worth of footage to show you guys, I'm probably doing something wrong. And I don't do this for a living, so for me, I'm just going to continue to be a hobbyist and do this because I just really love capturing flights. So editing software, lots and lots and lots of editing software out there that you can get. Some of it is automatically in your iPhone, like with iMovie. Other apps you can download, like ScreenFlow to an Apple product, an iMac or laptop. Androids, there's apps for those as well, Filmora and CapCut. And then there are your desktop computers, your laptop computers. They use much more complicated, feature-rich editing software like Adobe Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Shotcut, which is a no-charge software that's available out there. And that's the one I use, actually. I use Shotcut. And it does a great job. It's super simple and easy to use. Produces great videos. And they update it all the time. And it's no charge, which is something great. So taking a look at editing on an iPhone or an iPad, again, it comes resonant with the iMovie app. It's something that you already have there in your iPhone. But you can also get ScreenFlow, and that is actually a really fantastic bit of software and does a really great job for editing. If you're really wanting to get into the magic of post-production, you really want to see and use a PC-based editor. And in this particular case, this is Adobe Premiere Pro. This is, like the epitome. This and DaVinci Resolve are really where it's at when it comes to editors. And I'm sure a lot of professional editors use these tools every single day. Not just hobbyists like myself. And it's a console type interface where you've got a lot of stuff going on. You've got your media in the upper left, you've got your shots in the lower left, you have your preview screen in the middle, you have other screens on the right, you've got specific edited shots, and then you have your editing console in the lower right. A lot of stuff going on here. Frankly, this is way above my head. And then getting into other types of editors that really enhance your audio and your color grading. That's really the sweet spot for DaVinci Resolve, is this color grading tool that they have. And I mean, it does pretty much everything the Adobe does as well. And it's just kind of a, pick your religion type of thing, right? Which camp do you fall into? Garmin or Dynon, or, you pick your camp that you're in. And I personally really like DaVinci Resolve. I think it's a really cool editor. It's more like what I'm used to, where you have all of your video media in the upper left. You have your main viewer in the right. You can do lots of different things with your editing flow. And of course, you can color grade across the bottom. But this is Shotcut. And Shotcut's super simple. I know it doesn't look simple to you when you're first looking at it. Trust me, it is super, super simple. And for me, this is what I like to use. Again, I'm doing this for fun. I'm not doing it for work. It's something, that I want to be able to enjoy working on. And when I actually produce a video, a 15-minute video, frankly, will take me about 20 hours of editing. If I'm going to do it really, really well and do it right, it takes me about 20 hours. Now, I'm not a YouTuber who puts a video out like every couple of days, every 2, 3 days, who's in the editor constantly. I don't know all the shortcuts, and I'm my process is pretty basic. I suppose if I was doing it a lot, I'd get a lot faster. I could probably cut that 20 hours down to 8, maybe even less. But for me, I really want to enjoy the process. I work in a medical field, a highly regulated industry. I have a lot of things that I have to do a specific way. There's really no room for creativity in that industry, nor should there be. But this is what I do to kind of scratch my creative itch. And I find this to be very fun. It's artistic. It's audio, it's video, sonic. The whole thing kind of comes together, and it's just really neat to see one of your flights on a video. And then I also learn a lot. Oh, hey, I didn't realize I was doing that, or geez, I should have brought the flaps up a little sooner on that go around, or there's always something I learn that improves my flying. And I have a very strong sense of humility, and I know there's always something that I can do to improve how I fly. So I like this editor because I can enjoy it. It's super easy to use, and it gives me all of the performance that I need. We talked a little bit earlier, and I've mentioned it a few times, about video and audio alignment. And this is something that, again, a lot of people don't really mention, kind of like making sure you turn on all your cameras before you jump into the airplane, right? Video and audio alignment is key. If you don't do this before you start, after you turn on all your cameras before you start your engine, forget it. You're never, or I won't say you're never going to get your video and audio to line up, but it's going to be really hard. And if you're shooting with more than one camera, like I like to shoot with 6 cameras, getting all those tracks to line up can be brutal. And if you've ever seen old-timey movies where they start with the action board, action, right? That usually is what they do to sync up the video and the audio. Those are 2 things that record on separate tracks, and they are not merged into one. They are literally on a separate track, and you want to make sure that those are completely aligned. And when you're running multiple tracks, now you have to line up multiple video and audio tracks. So what do? Well, what I like to do is I like to clap with my hands. And so if people are watching me get ready to go out on a flight, and I've got cameras running, you'll usually hear me clapping my hands. And when I clap my hands, that creates spikes in the audio. And you can see those in the red area here. You can see that I've got multiple spikes from when I've clapped. And then what I do is I pick one of the spikes, which is usually the loudest one, and I line up all of the different tracks on that spike. Once I have all of the tracks lined up on that spike, I usually can start editing the video from that point forward. And that's why, when you go from one camera to another, and you see me talking to ATC, or I'm moving my hands to, do something on the panel or whatever, it all lines up. And, when my lips are moving, I'm speaking. It's not like some old bad, action movie or something, right? It's just a real simple technique. I didn't invent this. I picked it up from somewhere else, and I've seen a lot of people doing this as well. So that's why you use action boards, and that's just a way for you to sync up multiple cameras on the same alignment. Some final thoughts. Well, we're almost done. First of all, the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers actually filmed their flights. They didn't film them from the airplane necessarily that I know of, but they did film them from the ground. And some of the earliest flying was captured on video. And I think it's partly because they were trying to prove that, yeah, they actually did fly. But it's also really cool. And it's something that I find sharing the joy of flight with other people and giving them a sense of just how amazing it is, and what a privilege and honor it is to be able to fly, a small airplane, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. It's just such a profound thing to me that I couldn't imagine not capturing those flights and sharing them. And again, I pretty much do it for myself. I don't do it for other reasons. And when it's neat enough and cool enough, and I think you guys might have some interest, I'll share it with you. But other than that, safety is always first, always, when I fly. And I don't compromise that because I've got a camera somewhere in the airplane. Whether it be the phone on the seat next to me or 6 cameras, mounted into different positions around the airplane. Every flight, it's the same. It's always safe. And for me, filming is incidental to my flying. I don't fly so I can film. And that just doesn't enter into my equation. I film maybe 1 out of every 7 or 8 flights or whatever it is. And out of those videos that I do shoot, there's probably maybe 1 that is halfway interesting and worth even editing and sharing. So, for me, it's a hobby. It's not a job. I don't do this for work. I don't, really see this as a career. It's just something I enjoy, and I really hope you enjoy it as well. And I hope, it gives you some insight into aviation and flying around the Pacific Northwest. But most importantly, more than anything, just have fun, focus on your flying. Don't do it for the money. Just have fun. And really that's the end of the video. And again, I just want to express my thanks to you guys for watching, and I really love hearing from you. So feel free to leave me a comment if there's anything in the video that you'd like to get more information on. If you'd like more info on the mounts and where to get those, I'll put some links down in the show notes. And again, just have fun, and hope this year to do a lot more flying, and I'll see you out there. Thanks, guys. Take care.